They told me to forgive my brother for getting my wife pregnant, so I disappeared. Now he's dying and needs my kidney to survive, and they want me back only to use me as a donor. I returned just to look him in the eye and say, no. I flew 1,200 miles to look my brother in the eye and tell him no. Not on the phone. Not through a lawyer. Not in a letter. In person. In his hospital room. With tubes in his arms and my mother crying in the corner and my father blocking the door like I might change my mind if he stood in the way long enough. I said no. Then I walked out. That was 3 weeks ago. My brother is still dying. And I'm back in Denver living the life I built after they threw me away. My name is Soren Blackwell. I'm 37. My brother Griffin is 34. He's in stage 4 kidney failure at Mercy General. Both kidneys shutting down. Dialysis 3 times a week. Without a transplant he is 8 to 14 months. I'm a perfect match. Same blood type. Same tissue markers. The doctors confirmed it from medical records my mother submitted without my consent. She submitted my childhood medical records to a transplant coordinator. Without asking me. Without telling me. A nurse called my old phone number, the one I'd disconnected 4 years ago, and left a voicemail that bounced to my mother. My mother heard the message. That's how she found out I was a match. Not through me. Through a system she manipulated using records I didn't authorize. That's my family. They don't ask. They take. They've been taking from me my entire life. And now they want my kidney. Let me tell you why I said no. Griffin slept with my wife for 7 months. Her name was Shiloh. Together 6 years. Married 3. We were trying for a baby. 14 months of trying. Fertility appointments. Hormone shots I gave her myself because she was scared of needles and I'd practiced on oranges until I could do it without my hands shaking. While I was injecting hormones into my wife's stomach at 6 a.m. before work, she was texting my brother at 6:15. I know the timeline because I saw the phone records later. 6 a.m., fertility shot. 6:15 a.m., text to Griffin. Every morning. For 7 months. Griffin was living with us. Same story every family like mine tells. He lost his job. Got evicted. Needed a place. I said yes because he was my brother and I thought the word brother meant something more than shared DNA and a willingness to betray. He moved into our guest room in January. By March he was sleeping with my wife. By October I found out. I didn't find out the dramatic way. No walking in on them. No lipstick on a collar. I found a pregnancy test in the bathroom trash. Positive. I was thrilled for about 90 seconds. Then I ran downstairs to tell Shiloh and found her on the phone in the garage. With Griffin. Saying the words that ended my marriage. She said, "It's positive. We need to figure out what to tell Soren. The timing works. He'll think it's his." She was going to pass my brother's baby off as mine. Let me raise it. Let me change the diapers and pay for the pediatrician and call my mother to say, "You're a grandmother." While knowing the child wasn't mine and my brother was the father and 14 months of fertility treatments and orange practice needle injections were for a pregnancy I had nothing to do with. I stood in the hallway. Heard every word. Then I walked back upstairs. Sat on the bed. And made a decision. I called my parents that night. My father Lloyd picked up. I said, "Dad. Griffin has been sleeping with Shiloh for 7 months. She's pregnant. It's his. She was going to tell me it was mine. I need you and Mom to stand with me." Lloyd said, "Son. Slow down. Are you sure?" I said, "I heard her on the phone. Telling Griffin the test was positive and they needed to figure out what to tell me. I'm sure." My mother Agnes got on the line. She said, "Soren. This is devastating. But we need to think about this carefully. Griffin has been doing so well. He's been sober. He's been working. This is the most stable he's been in years." I said, "He's stable because he's living in my house eating my food sleeping with my wife. That's not stability. That's theft." Lloyd said, "Let's not use words like theft. This is family. People make mistakes." I said, 7 months isn't a mistake. 7 months is a calendar. He slept with her every week while I was at work paying the mortgage on the house they used as a hotel. That's not a mistake. That's a schedule." Agnes said, "We love you both. But there's a baby coming. A grandchild. We need to think about the baby." I said, "The baby is Griffin's. Not mine. You want me to think about the baby? Tell Griffin to think about the baby. He fathered it. He can take responsibility." Lloyd said, "We're asking you to be the bigger person. To forgive. To keep this family together. Be the bigger person." The phrase that means sacrifice yourself so nobody else has to be uncomfortable. I said, "If you don't tell Griffin what he did was wrong, you lose me. Tonight. Permanently." Agnes said, "Don't give us ultimatums. We're your parents." I said, "Then act like it." They didn't call Griffin that night. I gave them 24 hours. They spent it calling each other, calling their pastor, calling my aunt. Everyone discussing what to do about Soren's anger. Nobody discussing what Griffin did. Our 24. I called. I said, did you tell him he was wrong? My mother said, we talked to him. He's sorry. I said, did you tell him? He was wrong. She said, we told him the situation was hurtful. But we think with time. I hung up. Changed my number within 2 hours. Packed my car in 4 hours. Left the house keys on the counter next to the positive pregnancy test Shiloh hadn't thrown away yet. Drove 1,200 miles to Denver. Arrived 2 days later with $11,400 in savings, a truck, and the complete absence of anyone who chose me. I didn't tell anyone where I went. Not my parents. Not Griffin. Not Shiloh. Not my cousins. Not my coworkers. I told one person. My friend from college, Niles, who lived in Denver and had a couch I could sleep on. Niles picked me up at a gas station at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday. He said, you look like a man who just drove through a wall. I said, I drove through a family. The wall would have been easier. Denver. 4 years. Year 1. I slept on Niles' couch for 6 weeks. Got a job at an engineering firm. $74,000. Less than what I made back home, but enough. Moved into a studio apartment. $950 a month. Started rebuilding. During year 1 my family tried everything. My mother called Niles' phone. Niles said, he doesn't want contact. Agnes said, he's my son. Niles said, then you should have chosen him when he asked you to. She cried. Niles hung up. My father drove to my old job. Asked my former boss where I'd gone. My boss said, he resigned. Didn't say where he was going. I'm not a forwarding service. Griffin texted my old number 47 times before it was disconnected. I know because the phone company sent me the log when I canceled the line. Shiloh sent 3 letters to my old address. The new tenants returned them. They hired a PI within 6 months. $3,800. The PI found my city but not my address because I'd registered my apartment under Niles' name. The PI told my parents I was in Denver. My father wanted to fly out. My mother stopped him. She said, if we show up he'll get a restraining order. He meant every word. First smart thing she'd said in years. Year 2. Promoted to senior engineer. $92,000. Moved to a 1-bedroom apartment. Bought furniture for the first time in my life that was completely mine. Nobody else sat on my couch. Nobody else used my kitchen. Nobody else slept in my bed. Shiloh had the baby. A boy. I found out through Niles, who found out through a mutual friend. She and Griffin named him Reed. They were living together now. In an apartment my parents helped pay for. $1,600 a month that Lloyd and Agnes covered because Griffin's new job at an auto parts store paid $16 an hour and Shiloh wasn't working. $1,600 a month. For the brother who stole my wife and the woman who was going to trick me into raising his baby. My parents paid it happily because there was a grandchild now, and grandchildren make people forget the crimes committed to produce them. Year 3. Met a woman named Sage. Physical therapist. Direct. Honest. The kind of woman who says exactly what she means and doesn't expect you to decode it. We started dating in March. By September I told her everything. The wife. The brother. The pregnancy. The parents. The 1,200 miles. She said, you drove 1,200 miles instead of burning the house down. That's either discipline or grief. I said, both. She said, are you still angry? I said, I divested. She said, then why does your jaw tighten every time you say your brother's name? I didn't answer. Because she was right. I was done with my family. I wasn't done with the feeling. The feeling lives in a different room than the decision. And sometimes you walk into that room by accident and the furniture is exactly where you left it. Year 4. Revenue jumped. I moved to a contractor role. $140,000 a year. Bought a house. 3 bedrooms. Paid $340,000. Put down $85,000. Sage moved in. Not because I asked. Because she brought a box of kitchen stuff one weekend and never took it home. During year 4 my family was collapsing. Niles kept me updated. Not because I asked. Because Niles believes information is protection. Griffin and Shiloh split. Year 3. She left him for someone else. Took Reed. Filed for child support. $620 a month on $16 an hour. Griffin moved back in with my parents. Again. 31 years old. In his childhood bedroom. My parents' finances were strained. $1,600 a month they'd been paying for Griffin's apartment. Plus $4,800 for his lawyer when Shiloh filed for custody. Plus $2,200 when his car broke down. Plus groceries. Utilities. Insurance. $28,000 in 3 years on a son who'd never held a job longer than 14 months. Then Griffin got sick. Niles texted, your brother's in the hospital. Kidneys. Serious. I said, thanks for telling me. Niles said, you going to call? I said, no. That was 5 months ago. Griffin's kidneys were failing. Stage 3. Then stage 4. Dialysis started 4 months ago. 3 times a week. 4 hours each session. The doctors said without a transplant he'd need dialysis for life. Or he'd die. My mother found my phone number. I don't know how. Maybe the pie again. Maybe Niall slipped. Niall swears he didn't. Doesn't matter. She called. She said, Soren. Griffin is dying. His kidneys are failing. He needs a transplant. The donor list is 3 to 5 years. He doesn't have 3 to 5 years. I said, I know. She said, you know? I said, Niall's told me 5 months ago. I've known. She said, you've known for 5 months and you didn't call. I said, why would I call? He slept with my wife for 7 months. You told me to forgive him. I left. That was 4 years ago. His kidneys failing doesn't change any of that. She said, he could die. I said, people die, Mom. That's not new information. What's new is you calling me for the first time in 4 years and the first words out of your mouth aren't I'm sorry. Their Griffin needs something. She went quiet. Then she said the thing that confirmed everything I'd always known about my place in this family. She said, the transplant coordinator ran the family medical records. You're a match. A perfect match. Same blood type. Same tissue markers. The best possible donor for Griffin. I said, how do they have my medical records? She said, I submitted your childhood records from the family file. The pediatric files from Dr. Lennox. I said, you submitted my medical records to a transplant program without my knowledge or consent. She said, I was trying to help your brother. I said, you were trying to use me as a parts catalog. You didn't call me because Griffin is dying. You called me because you found out I'm compatible. If I wasn't a match, this phone would never have rung. She started crying. I said, would you have called me if I wasn't a match? If my blood type was different? If my tissue markers didn't line up? Would you have called just to tell me Griffin was sick? Or would I have found out when Niles texted me the obituary? She didn't answer. Because the answer was obvious. They didn't want Soren. They wanted Soren's kidney. My father called the next morning. Different strategy. Direct. Lloyd is a direct man when he wants something. He said, son. I'm going to be straight with you. Griffin is dying. You're a match. We need you to come home and go through the screening process. If you're approved, the surgery could save his life. I said, no. He said, Soren. I said, no. He said, he's your brother. He's dying. I said, he was my brother when he slept with my wife for 7 months. He was my brother when he got her pregnant. He was my brother when you told me to forgive him and be the bigger person. He was my brother for all of that. And none of you chose me. Now his kidneys are failing and suddenly brotherhood matters again. It doesn't work that way. You can't discard someone for 4 years and then call them when you need a body part. He said, you'd let him die. I said, I'm not letting him die. His kidneys are letting him die. His choices are letting him die. His drinking. His lifestyle. The stress he put on his body for 15 years of bad decisions. That's what's killing him. I'm just choosing not to fix it. He said, that's cold. I said, cold is telling your son to forgive the man who stole his wife. Cold is paying $28,000 to support the brother who destroyed your other son's marriage. Cold is submitting my medical records to a transplant program without asking me. You want to talk about cold? You wrote the textbook. I'm just reading it back to you. He hung up. The campaign started. My Aunt Bernice called. She said, Soren. I know you're hurt. But Griffin is dying. You can't let anger kill your brother. I said, anger isn't killing Griffin. Kidney failure is. I didn't cause his kidney failure. I didn't cause his drinking. I didn't cause 15 years of neglecting his health. I'm not responsible for fixing a body I didn't break. She said, but you can fix it. You're a match. I said, being able to do something and being obligated to do something are different things. I can also give $100,000 to a stranger on the street. Doesn't mean I owe it. My cousin Marshall called. He said, bro. Your family is begging. Griffin looks bad. Really bad. Yellow skin. Lost 30 pounds. He's on dialysis 3 times a week. You should at least visit. I said, why? So they can ambush me with doctors and consent forms. So they can sit me in a room with a transplant coordinator who asks if I've considered the gift of life. I know how this works. They don't want to visit. They want a kidney with legs. Marshall said, that's harsh. I said, watching my brother announce he got my wife pregnant while my parents nodded along was harsh. This is just honest. My mother escalated. She called Sage. Found her through social media. Called the physical therapy clinic where Sage works. Sage told me about it that night. She said, your mother called my office today. She told the receptionist it was a family emergency. They patched her through. I said, what did she say? Sage said, She said Griffin is dying and you're the only match and you're refusing and she needs me to convince you. She said, you're the woman in his life now. He'll listen to you. Please. I'm begging you. Make him save his brother. I said, what did you say? Sage said, I said, Mrs. Blackwell, your son made his decision. I respect it. I won't override it. If you want Soren to consider helping Griffin, you should start by acknowledging why he left in the first place. She hung up on me. The church got involved. My parents' pastor, a man named Howell from Grace Fellowship, called me directly. I don't know who gave him my number. He said, Soren. I'm calling as a man of faith. Your brother is gravely ill. You have the ability to save his life. I'd like to discuss what forgiveness and mercy might look like in this situation. I said, Pastor, with respect. 4 years ago I asked my parents to stand with me when my brother got my wife pregnant. Nobody from your church called me then. Nobody called to check on me. Nobody prayed for the brother who was betrayed. Now the brother who did the betraying needs an organ and suddenly the church has my number. That tells me everything I need to know about where mercy lives in your congregation. He said, I understand your frustration. But a life is at stake. I said, my life was at stake 4 years ago. My marriage. My mental health. My faith in my family. All of it was at stake and nobody intervened. Nobody held a prayer circle for the brother who lost everything. But Griffin needs a kidney and suddenly it's a mission from God. No, thank you, Pastor. I'll keep my kidney and my boundaries. He didn't call again. Then I made a decision. The one that made this story what it is. I decided to fly home. Not to donate. To say no in person. Because 4 years of silence wasn't enough. I needed Griffin to hear it from my mouth. In his hospital room. While he was connected to machines. I needed him to look at the face of the brother he betrayed and hear the word no and understand that some things cost more than a kidney to fix. Sage said, are you sure? That's not closure. That's confrontation. I said, I've had 4 years of closure. This is confirmation. I flew home on a Thursday. Rented a car. Drove to Mercy General. Walked through the front entrance. Took the elevator to the 4th floor. Nephrology ward. Room 412. My mother was in the hallway. She saw me and her face crumbled. She ran toward me. I put my hand up. I said, I'm not here for you. I'm here for Griffin. 5 minutes. Then I'm gone. She said, Soren. Thank God. I knew you'd come. The coordinator is on the 2nd floor. I can take you there right now. The screening takes about. I said, Mom. Stop. I'm not donating. I came to tell Griffin myself. Not because I owe him that. Because I owe myself the right to say it to his face. Her face changed. From relief to confusion to something I've never seen on a mother's face before. Terror. Not for Griffin. For the realization that her son flew 1,200 miles to say no. I walked into room 412. Griffin was in the bed. Thin. Yellow. Machines beeping. 4 lines. A dialysis port visible on his arm. He looked 15 years older than 34. Kidney failure ages a person the way guilt should but never does. My father was sitting in a chair by the window. He stood up when he saw me. He said, Soren. Son. I said, sit down, Dad. This won't take long. I walked to the bed. Griffin's eyes were open. He looked at me. First time in 4 years. His lips moved before his voice worked. He said, Soren. You came. I said, I came to tell you something. He said, I know what you came to tell me. Mom said you're a match. I said, I am a match. Perfect match. Same blood type. Same tissue markers. I could give you a kidney tomorrow and you'd probably survive. The doctors said the odds are excellent. His eyes filled up. He said, Soren. Please. I said, no. One word. In a hospital room. With machines beeping and my mother crying in the hallway and my father gripping the arm of a chair like it was the only solid thing in the room. Griffin said, I'm going to die. I said, maybe. The donor list is long. Dialysis can sustain you. Medical science is improving every year. You have options. I'm just not one of them. He said, why? I said, because 4 years ago you slept with my wife for 7 months. Got her pregnant. Were going to let me raise your child without telling me. And when I found out and begged our parents to stand with me, they chose you. Told me to forgive. Told me to be the bigger person. So I left. Built a life. And now you're in this bed because your kidneys failed and the first thing this family did was dig through my childhood medical records without my permission to see if they could use me one more time. Not call to apologize. Not call to say we were wrong. Call to check my blood type. Griffin was crying. I wasn't. I said, you were my brother. You were supposed to protect me the way I protected you. I co-signed your apartment. Paid your electric bill 3 times. Let you live in my house when you had nowhere to go. And you repaid me by sleeping with my wife in my guest bedroom and getting her pregnant in the house I paid for. He said, I'm sorry. I've been sorry every day. I said, sorry doesn't rebuild a marriage. Sorry doesn't undo a pregnancy. Sorry doesn't give me back the 14 months of fertility treatments I paid for while my wife was already pregnant by my brother. And sorry doesn't entitle you to my kidney. My father spoke. He said, Soren, you've made your point. Can we discuss the donation? I said, I've made my point. There's no discussion. The answer is no. It was no when Mom called. It was no when Dad called. It was no when Aunt Bernice called and Cousin Marshall called and Pastor Howell called and Mom called my girlfriend at work. It's no now. Standing here. Looking at him. It's no. My mother came into the room. She said, how can you look at your brother dying and say no? What kind of person does that? I said, the kind of person you created. The one who learned that this family takes and takes and takes from the son who gives. I gave money. I gave housing. I gave patience. I gave my wife a home that you let Griffin turn into his personal hotel. And now you want my kidney. There is nothing left to give. Not because I don't have it. Because you've spent 37 years teaching me that giving to this family means losing a piece of myself. I'm done losing pieces. I looked at Griffin one more time. He was staring at me. Not with anger. With recognition. The look of a man who finally understands the weight of what he did. Not because someone told him. Because the consequence was standing at the foot of his bed wearing a coat and holding a boarding pass for a flight back to Denver. I said, I hope you find a donor. I genuinely do. I hope you survive this. But it won't be because of me. Because you used up every ounce of grace I had when you took Shiloh and this family asked me to applaud. I walked out. Past my mother who grabbed my arm. I removed her hand gently. Past my father who said, son, please. Past the nurse's station. Into the elevator. Down to the lobby. Through the front doors. Into the rental car. To the airport. Onto a plane. Back to Denver. Back to Sage. Back to the house I own and the job I earned and the life I built from $11,400 and a friend's couch and the complete refusal to let the people who threw me away decide when I come back. 3 weeks since the hospital. My mother calls every day. I don't answer. She leaves voicemails. They've evolved from begging to angry to defeated. Week 1 voicemail, Soren, please reconsider. Griffin doesn't have time. You're his best hope. Week 2 voicemail, I don't understand how you can do this. He's your brother. You're choosing to let him die over something that happened 4 years ago. Week 3 voicemail, I'm not calling to fight. I'm calling to tell you that Griffin has been put on the national donor list. His position is 847th. The average wait is 4.7 years. He may not have 4.7 years. If something happens to him, I need you to know that you could have saved him. And you chose not to. I'll carry that. But so will you. She's wrong about the last part. I won't carry it. Because the choice to not donate isn't a choice to let him die. It's a choice to not sacrifice myself for a family that never sacrificed anything for me. Griffin's position, 847th. Average wait, 4.7 years. His doctors say he is 8 to 14 months without a transplant. Those numbers are his problem. The way my destroyed marriage was my problem 4 years ago when nobody flew 1,200 miles to help me. My father sent one text. First and only text since the hospital visit. He said, I've spent 4 years thinking about what we did. We were wrong. About the forgiveness. About choosing Griffin. About everything. I know that now. But your brother is dying and being right won't keep you warm at 3 a.m. when you realize you could have saved him. I replied, being wrong didn't keep you warm at 3 a.m. when I was sleeping on a friend's couch 1,200 miles away because you told me to forgive the man who got my wife pregnant. You had 4 years to call and say you were wrong. You called when you needed my kidney. That's not an apology. That's a purchase order. He didn't reply. Last night Sage and I had dinner at home. She made salmon. I made the salad. Normal evening. The kind of evening that used to feel impossible and now feels like oxygen. She said, your mom's voicemail today was different. I said, how? She said, she wasn't begging. She was just talking. About you as a kid. How you used to build things with Legos and take them apart and build them again. How you never cried when something broke. Just rebuilt. I said, that sounds like a setup. She said, it sounded like a mother who finally understands that the son she lost is the one who builds. And the son she kept is the one who breaks. I looked at Sage. At the kitchen. At the house. The table where 2 people eat dinner without secrets. I said, I'm not the bad guy in this story. She said, I know. But you're the only one strong enough to be blamed for it. She's right. The strong one. The one who gets asked to sacrifice because he can afford to lose. I can't afford to lose anymore. Not a kidney. Not my peace. Not the life I built from $11,400 and a man named Niles who answered the phone at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday. My brother is 847th on a list. My parents are in a house they can barely afford. Shiloh is raising a baby that isn't mine with a man who isn't Griffin. And I'm in Denver. With Sage. With my house. With a kidney that stays exactly where it is. Not because I'm cruel. I gave them everything. They chose Griffin. Now Griffin needs the one thing only I can provide. And for the first time in 37 years, I said no. It's the strongest word I've ever spoken. And I'm never taking it back.